Welcome back to Midnight Outcry, everyone, and good evening. Tonight, we're going to dive into 10 intimate testimonies from actual people who experienced an inexplicable phenomenon in the enigmatic Appalachian Mountains. These aren't urban legends or made-up stories. These are unvarnished, unadulterated accounts from those whose lives were irrevocably altered by what they saw in those historic hills. Due of their need, each individual sought out to tell their tale, to let people know that the oldest mountain range in America is home to something genuinely eerie. If this is your first time, make sure to subscribe to Midnight Outcry for chilling, real horror stories, you to the bone. To ensure you don't miss any true terror alerts, press the notification bell. Let's now listen to 10 individuals that have the courage to express their most eerie Appalachian scenes in which the mountains appear to be watching, and certain experiences create wounds that never go away. Just 6 months have passed since what I'm going to tell you occurred, and I still have trouble falling asleep at night. I think even in my own house, I was always being observed. I'm not sure if what I experienced I know I'll never be able to return, whether those mountains were human or something else entirely. Sarah is my name, and perhaps someone else has gone through what I did, so please share. Perhaps someone could explain why hunting is still going on. Me. For more than 15 years, I have been trekking the Appalachian trails. I'm not some weekend warrior who loses their way while searching Instagram. I am very familiar with these mountains. Or I thought I did, however. I hold a certification as a wilderness guide. I have the right equipment, and I've spent a lot of spending nights by themselves in the backcountry without experiencing any discomfort. I've always found refuge in the mountains, a haven from the bustle of daily life. I feel most at ease when only my pack and I are present, together with the never-ending ridgeline that stretches out to the horizon. This specific journey was intended to be a 3-day camping trip for lone individuals in a secluded area of Virginia's Blue Ridge Mountains. I selected a trail that receives perhaps a dozen hikers each month, the type of area where hiking is possible for days without observing a different soul. Early October brought ideal trekking conditions with the fresh mountain air that makes you feel alive and the leaves that are just beginning to turn. I had traveled this exact path twice previously, so I was familiar with all the water sources, excellent camping locations, and challenging a portion of the path. On a Friday morning, I parked at the little gravel lot that designates the trailhead and began my journey. It is only accessible by 4-wheel drive because to the poor maintenance of the Forest Service road that leads to it, securely. I felt that familiar feeling as I locked my Jeep and shoulder-mounted my load, a feeling of calm and exhilaration. My element was this: I was supposed to be here. Everything about the first day was flawless. I appreciated the hike and had a fantastic time. Solitude, and make camp at the location I had chosen. A tiny clearing next to a mountain, stream around 8 miles in. I prepared dinner, set up my tent, filtered the water, and sat down for what I thought would be a quiet night. The only noises were the rustle of leaves and the gurgling creek, amid the soft wind and the owl's sporadic hoot. However, as I sat by my tiny, something didn't feel right about the campfire that first night. I was unable to identify it. First, it was quieter than normal in the forest. No tiny creatures scuttling. There were no night birds chirping to one another through the underbrush, just a strange silence that increased my awareness of each and every noise I made. The crinkle of my jacket seemed strangely loud when I moved. As soon as I stirred, the sound of wood burning reverberated oddly through the trees. I choked it to my whim and retired to bed at around 10 o'clock. However, during that I kept waking up during the night, not from discomfort or nightmares, just this persistent sensation that I was being watched. You are familiar with the feeling that someone is looking at you from on the other side of the room. It was similar, but more intense. I would lie motionless in my sleeping bag, paying close attention, but hearing nothing unusual. Beautiful weather arrived on Saturday morning. Weather and I told myself that I had just been experiencing first-night jitters. Even seasoned hikers. The great solitude of the deep woods can occasionally frighten me. I broke camp early and proceeded along a path that would lead me to my next intended campground more into the mountains. 10 miles or so farther in, things began to go wrong at that point. At about midday, I noticed movement in my peripheral vision while I was taking a water break on a rocky ledge overlooking the valley below. Vision, merely a dark flicker between trees 100 yards away. When I looked straight ahead, nothing was present. I spent a few minutes examining the area, wondering if I might have spotted a bear or a deer, but the woodland was still. It occurred once more an hour later. This time, I was positive. About 50 yards to my left, I noticed a tall, dark-clad man walking parallel to the trail. However, when I halted and said, "Hello, is someone there?" and my voice was heard, not responded to. The ensuing quiet was so heavy that it seemed as though the forest as a whole was holding its breath. I attempted to make sense of it. Perhaps another hiker was using a different path. Perhaps I was seeing clouds moving and casting shadows. However, the same instincts that had protected me for years in the forest were warning me that something was incorrect. I arrived at my intended campsite for the second night by late afternoon. Another little clearing. This one was encircled on 3 sides by tall hemlocks that formed natural walls. I have before and always tented here. Felt safe, but the surrounding woods suddenly seemed more like a trap than a barrier. Something I saw while erecting my tent chilled my blood. In the gentle, there were footsteps on the ground close to the fire ring. New ones. Unquestionably not my boot prints, bigger with a distinct tread design. This clearing had recently been visited by someone. I just tried to convince myself that everything was simply another hiker who had visited the location before continuing, but the prints repeatedly went about my tent spot as if someone has been wandering around, taking in the area. No prints were visible, indicating a path out of the clearing on any of the well-known paths. My world really started to descend into nightmare territory on the second night. I didn't construct a fire. I had a gut feeling that I should remain anonymous and not make more of an impression than was absolutely necessary. As night fell, I ate a cold dinner in my tent. Every sensation was sharpened, every shadow suspect. Now there was total quiet. No night birds, no insects, nothing. The whole ecosystem of the woodland seemed to have fled from something. I heard it for the first time around midnight. For the first time. Steps. Slow, methodical steps encircling my camp. They moved deliberately but without haste, as though whoever was outside knew I wouldn't be leaving. After pausing for some minutes, the steps would continue in the same manner, measured separation from my tent. In my sleeping bag, I lay motionless, hardly moving. I was holding my knife and inhaling. For what seemed like hours, the footsteps persisted. Occasionally, they appeared to originate from several directions, as though there were several people outside, but I never heard voices. I've never heard the typical noises individuals make at night while walking through the forest. Upon the arrival of dawn, I unzipped my tent using trembling hands. The previous night's footsteps had vanished, replaced by fresh ones. These even circled. Some of them were driven so deeply into the ground near my tent that it seemed like something really heavy had made them. I quickly packed my belongings and set off on my hike. I wanted to stay another night, but my body was screaming for me to leave those mountains right away. The path, it was 12 miles back to my car, and I wanted to go as quickly as I could. However, the forest had other ideas. I discovered I was lost about 4 miles into my hike. It seemed as though the road I had traveled countless of times before had transformed in an instant. I couldn't find the markers I remembered. The route split off where it had never split before. My GPS device indicated that I was in an impossible place. As stated by the then, I found myself standing in the center of a fictitious lake. I started to feel worried when I realized I was being wounded. With each incorrect turn, I ventured farther into unmarked wilderness. The trail behind me didn't look the same as it had only minutes before I attempted to retrace my steps. After that, I observed my stalker. It was motionless on a ridge approximately 200 yards away, observing me. I couldn't see details from that distance, but it was unmistakably tall, human-shaped, and wearing black apparel that didn't seem to reflect light, but rather absorbed it. I waved with my hand, but it didn't answer. I yelled, but it remained motionless. It did nothing but observe. I took off running. I smashed through the brush, completely off the route and moving toward what I hoped was my vehicle. Branches ripped at my rucksack and clothes. I often fell, scraping my knees and hands on roots and stones. I heard something following behind me, just maintaining, not running that same steady tempo, as though it was aware that it didn't have to hurry. After several hours, I wandered onto a dirt road I didn't recognize, fatigued and confused. However, the road signified civilization. I pursued it until I discovered a residence where the occupants made a call. The sheriff on my behalf. I was talking incoherently and hardly intelligible when the deputy showed up, concerning being stalked and followed in the forest. 2 days later, the search and rescue crew located my Jeep. My 3-day supply of several items of equipment that had been safely packed in my tent were gone, along with the food. According to the deputy, it appeared for weeks, someone had been camping in my equipment, but that was not feasible. I would only spend 2 days in the woods. I'm still baffled by what transpired in those mountains. I'm not sure how I'd become disoriented on a path I was familiar with, or how my equipment ended up strewn all over a campsite I had never seen before. I am unable to describe the figure who observed me from the ridge line or the footprints that came and went, but I know one thing with complete assurance. There was something in those old mountains that wanted me to remain. Something that doesn't leave typical traces or appear on maps. Something that still whispers from shadows that shouldn't be there, calling my name on silent nights. Since then, I've relocated twice. Yet the observation never ends. And occasionally, when I'm by myself in my apartment, I swear I smell mountain air and hemlock leaking beneath my door at night. I still have cold chills when I wake up, even though this was 3 years ago. My family believes I'm going crazy, but I am aware of what I observed in that hollow. In the Appalachian, there are some things that ought to have remained hidden, and I unintentionally woke one of them up.